Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Carla, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Guy. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure's all mine, right? Pleasure's all mine. So, question for you. You're in Australia. You're at a barbecue.
Okay.
And a stranger stops you or walks up to you and says, "Hi, my name's so-and-so. What do you do for a living?" What do you say now?
So now I would probably say that I'm a doctor who actually teaches people how to make their own mind-body medicine. Going from a world where I was dishing out pills and potions to a complete turnaround of teaching how we can create higher states of health and well-being just by relying on our own biology. I find that transition just ultimately so empowering, and that is my passion. So that's kind of probably what I would say.
Yeah, and it's like, obviously I've known you for quite a bit of time now, and that turnaround has been amazing, and that's why I'm so excited to have you on this podcast today and share everything. And do you find that reaction with people, there's curiosity, or do you think, where do people generally lie with that answer?
Yeah, it depends on the person, I guess. So some people really like me to, when I expand on it, really like me to go into some of the science behind it, talking about heart math and brain waves and placebo effects, and other people just totally get it, and they're on board with it, and they talk about their experiences, and so that's really cool, and I can kind of share and build on that model. So yeah, it's kind of probably two houses that it kind of sits in. Two
camps, yeah. But I think the conversations are definitely changing. That's what I'm finding anyway, even with since starting to let it in, for sure. Yeah. So take us back a little bit, and why? Before we get into the mind-body connection, why become a doctor in the first place? Like, can you take us through that first step first?
Well, it was certainly something that I really, from a young age, was clear that I wanted to do. And I've kind of gone back over the years to work out really what was the root driving factor. And through doing this work, I've come to really realize that it was really two main driving things that kind of... this is why medicine called to me. Was I always had this fascination with the body and the connection of the mind body as well, about how we have this ability to heal. And my understanding when I went into medicine was basically really how we harness that to accelerate that process when we need to. And the whole placebo effect fascinated me. The power of hypnosis fascinated me, that you can change your physiology in certain states. And so I was always really, really fascinated by that. And my dad, I think, instilled quite a lot of those concepts in me. We used to do this. We used to have this light microscope, and he would just do a little nick on his finger and squeeze a bit of his own blood into this dish, which then you can look down a microscope with, and you can see all the different corpuscles, all the different red blood cells and the shape, and this three-dimensional world which I couldn't see with as a youngster. And I could just see there's all these universes that exist within us, and all this stuff that's going on that consciously I've got no idea of. So I guess I've got to thank him in part for a lot of that, because it really awakened this, wow, I want to understand. I really want to understand. So that was kind of the first thing that kind of drew me to it.
Okay.
And kind of going on this journey, as I've kind of come up against some struggles, that sense of disconnect, feeling that I'm not having the impact that I would like to, I've kind of come to understand that really there was a deep sense of fear that actually drove me to do medicine. I'd always suffered with chronic health conditions. So even from the age of 3 months, I had developed eczema all over my body. And then later in sort of when I was about 8 or so, developed asthma and some chronic fatigue into my teens. So I kind of knew how all-encompassing it can be when you have a health condition. When you're well, it's not on your radar at all. You're just enjoying life. But how when you are sick, it becomes your whole world. And I kind of really never wanted to feel that. I wanted control over that. And in my mind, I felt if I could understand this another level, then I could look after myself, I could look after my family, and keep them safe. So it really was this deep sense of fear that I had about getting sick, about losing that freedom that we have in our bodies. And through time, I've certainly come to get further insights, which I'm sure will continue to unfold, about really a deep-seated sense of unworthiness, actually trying to compensate for that, figuring in my mind that I was kind of brought up in a very doing, proactive, logical, loving household, that really I interpreted that environment as I was not of value unless I was doing something. I wasn't worthy unless I was actively doing something. And I maybe transfer that to medicine as the ultimate way to give back and be useful and add value. And kind of just trying to fill in this void within me. But through the years of externally trying to fill up and feeling that sense of disconnect and doing more and more things, I came to realize that it was never going to go away unless I really dealt with the underlying issue.
It didn't fill the void of then having the status of being a doctor and wanting to help others. So my question for you is, before we get, because I'm so keen to get into the emotions, so I'm trying to bite my tongue here and, and hold the rein slightly. But how long did it take you to become a doctor? And then what was it like when you became a practicing doctor? First of all, go there. Yeah. And how long did you practice for?
Okay. So I went to university. So I started training in 2000 and did 5 years at medical school, and then another 5 years in hospital training.
Wow.
Specializing in general practice in that time. So I think it was 12 or 13 years. So yeah, I mean, it's been 18 years now in total since I went to medical school. So it's been a long journey, and learning the theory I always found fascinating. And it was really interesting when it came to the practical application, which was when I felt that disconnect. I felt that the hospital environment, just intrinsically, the energy, and again, this kind of fed that unworthiness of like, oh, this doesn't feel like a healing environment. I'm not sure I like this environment. And that sort of clinical environment didn't really resonate with me. And I also found that I couldn't really connect with my patients. I couldn't really give them the time. Once I kind of got into qualified in 2005, once I was kind of set free to provide the service which I've been training all that time to do, I just felt frustrated that I really couldn't get to the root cause of their issues. I didn't have time. That many of my colleagues felt similarly too. We were just doing the best we could with the resources we had, and just trying to make the most of it. And it just never quite sustained. It never quite fulfilled. And I guess it was a good thing because it kept me asking questions and seeking.
Okay. So, and that's really interesting. So what was the next step? Because I just, and this was the same for me. And I've met other people that we have this idea in our head and we go for it and we dedicate our lives to certain things and we do all this work and stuff. And then we get there and we go, oh shit, maybe this isn't what I thought it was going to be or what was going to, but you had to do 10 years of life and wonderful experiences. Don't get me wrong. I'd never take anything back.
Yeah,
right? Everything's a lesson I look at now. But what did you do next? So you get that feeling inside, because we can suppress it or we can look at it ultimately, right?
Yeah, I think I did. I'll have to admit, I did spend some years looking for more. Like, I'll do another course. I'll specialize in something else. I did that for some time. And then it got to a point where I really wasn't happy. And I kind of started to go down professional, sort of personal development route, seeking things outside of the field of medicine. And it was really probably the thing that finally hit home for me when I was just starting to look into that kind of work was when my sister became unwell. So my sister, in her early 30s, just having had 2 young children, suddenly developed quite a severe onset of rheumatoid arthritis. And rheumatoid arthritis is, as you know, it's an immune-mediated disease, and if it's not controlled, it can actually lead to irreversible destruction of the joints. It can lead to disability and pain, and it was really hard to watch her going through that process when she's trying to look after 2 young kids and work, and that fear that came up that she wasn't able to predict her future and know that she was going to keep everyone safe. And that was really when it struck home to me, Guy, that despite all this training that I had, I really didn't have the tools to help her. I knew from a medical perspective where it might be going, immunosuppressants, lots of painkillers, and that wasn't a satisfactory option for me. And I know that it wasn't for her either. But at the time, it really rocked my world, because I really didn't know how to handle it. All the reasons I'd gone in and done all this work for that many years fundamentally was to look after people and have that, certainty of health. And it broke down. So I'm ashamed to say that I didn't know what to say to her. I couldn't give her the hope and the certainty that she really needed. I didn't have some of the insights that I have now. And I just withdrew from that situation. And that's when I started to look elsewhere at other things, and I found Tony Robbins actually in a roundabout way. And I have to say, I did one of his events, the Unleash the Power Within weekend, and this is a huge event. He does all the way around the world. It's a 4-day event, and on the first night, it's all about breaking out of your state or creating a new state and overcoming. And the first night is a firewalk, where you'll get 6,000-7,000 people. Have you done it, Guy?
I've done it, yeah.
Yeah, right. So you know it well. So it's a crazy, amazing thing. He spends the day getting you into a state, getting you to raise your energy, and you do this firewalk usually about midnight to drums and in bare feet. You all walk down in unison to these multiple fire lanes and do your walk. And I was still very analytical and suspicious at this point. I was like, really? Does that really happen? I kind of thought it might be a gimmick. Like, I didn't actually believe that you could walk bare feet on hot coals. It was just something that I just couldn't compute at all in my analytical mind. But when it came to the moment of all these people in unison, and you're in this really peak state and you feel as one, and I had kind of a moment walking down where I thought I could walk away and no one would know. That little moment. And then I realized, with all these people, with all this power, that there had to be truth in this, that I had to take that leap of faith and trust in the process. And when it came time to actually doing my firewalk, I don't know what kicked in, but there was just something that changed in me, and I just powered through and did my firewalk without any blemishes, and got to the end where you stamp your feet and celebrate. And that would really hit home to me of, wow, there is so much that I don't understand that our physical body can do. That is way beyond my comprehension. And the power of belief in that moment, the power of changing your state of being in that moment, and harnessing that it got me on this whole. It just really inspired me about what we're able to do, how unlimited we are. And I kind of started reading books about the placebo effect, and certain thought leaders in that area, Lisa Rankin and Dr. David Hamilton, and then came across Dr. Joe Dispenza too in that work. So yeah, I would say those are kind of the 2 defining moments where it gave me that hope of, yeah, there is something.
What year was this when you did Tony?
I would say it's probably 2012, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, so a few years ago now. And I loved a lot of his work. Over time, what I found was Dr. Joe Dispenza really resonated with me deeply because it had a practice that I could do every day.
Got it.
Right.
So I'm just trying to get the timeline going here. Yeah. So you did Tony. Were you still practicing as a doctor at this point?
I was still practicing as a GP.
As a GP, yeah. And then, so you started looking at this work, and then you said, because I bet you through the circles of Joe Dispenza as well. Yeah. When did you decide to go to Joe's workshop?
So that was relatively recently. That was 2 years ago, really.
Okay.
I actually came across his work through a Tony Robbins friend asking these questions, and I watched a YouTube video of him, and I read his book, Becoming You Are the Placebo. And it just was one of those, I guess we all have teachers that really speak to us or really resonate with us, and that really deeply resonated with me, and it felt like a real how-to guide.
Right.
It really answered a lot of the questions that I'd felt that some other teachers hadn't answered for me. And so that time 2 years ago, I essentially read his other 2 books at the time in quick succession, and I decided I wanted to go to one of his events. And this was, he had an event in October in London. So this was probably about 2 years ago. And I was obviously living in and around London at the time. And I just decided that I couldn't wait that long, that this was too good. I needed to go as soon as I could to try to find out more. So I went to his progressive workshop in Hamburg that summer. And it's like a two-day workshop at the time. And it just opened more doors for me as to what was possible.
How was your analytical mind behaving at that point? Because when I first went to Joe's workshop, I was pretty open. Like I'd even done an ayahuasca ceremony by then. I was fully down the rabbit hole completely, like for years. And when I got to Joe's event, I was like, oh my God, he's just speaking my language, but using science. I was trying to put into context. But for you, coming from medically trained, and seeing a certain work, was you still practicing at this point as well?
I was still.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So I have to admit, it was kind of all undercover. Even my family, it was only my sister who knew I was going, because I talked about him, and no one was really getting it. So I just kind of went on my own and did my thing. And I was. Kind of when I spoke to people, I was a bit apologetic of what I did, because I kind of worried about this kind of being accepted thing in that world. But obviously everyone's so wonderful in that environment, and it took a while. There was still parts of it that I questioned, or should I say, he teaches a particular technique, the breath, about moving, pulling the mind out of the body, moving all that stored energy that gets stuck in certain centers in certain parts of our body back into the brain from whence it came. And he started teaching this technique, and the analytical mind came up as soon as I felt uncomfortable. It was always a good tool to call upon, as to not to try something unknown. So there was definitely, I gave it a good go when I went. But it took a while. I didn't continue to do that particular breath when I came back. I needed to carry on doing the work, those meditations every day. But I continued to meditate every day once I returned from that workshop, and started to see fairly quickly some changes in my life, which I couldn't quite understand on a logical basis.
Yeah, on a logical basis, which then opens Pandora's box, doesn't it? It's
right.
Kind of...
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's a new realm of almost study to be looking at and delving into.
Yeah.
So let's keep the timeline going. We'll get up to speed, and then we'll jump into things. So you've come back. You continue into practice. What is the feeling like for you when you're in the practice? Because I have no doubt people become. And I've never worked in the industry. I have no doubt doctors become there to do good and help other people. And I personally question the system, that especially as I look at this work, I certainly don't knock it, because everyone's trying to do the same thing and help people at the end of the day. So you're back, you're in this environment, you're starting to meditate. So all of a sudden you're probably living a double life.
100%. Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you. You know, the medical model is kind of breaking down, and the acute model is still working, works very elegantly. But I worked in the chronic disease model, and that needed a lot of love and attention. And I tried to share it with people. I tried to give nuggets at that time with my colleagues, but maybe I wasn't saying it right, or I just wasn't in the right place to give that message. That it wasn't, I felt like it wasn't being heard. So I did kind of have a bit of a double life, I have to say, doing my meditations every morning and then doing my general practice.
Okay. So let's go next step. So you go back to Joe's workshop for the follow-up. So just for the listeners, at the time, the model's changed now, but he did a 2-day progressive. You go there. And then if you want to continue further, it was 4.5 days, I think the second one is, the advanced.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So how long between progressive and advanced, and then you go and do the advanced?
So I did the progressive in the summer, that 2-day event, and I went to his advanced in the following January. So just 6 months or so after that. And what I'd found was coming back from the weekend event, I started to work on a potential. He talks about manifesting your future, and I really wanted to work on a relationship at that time in my life. And sort of living on, I'd struggled with living on my own, and before I'd come to his work, and I was really found that his work really gave me that sense of feeling at peace with myself, that self-love, and I found it profoundly powerful that when I came home, within 8 weeks, I had created a relationship that is just amazing, and something that I'd never had before. So there was that piece that was kind of spurring me on, and I was still working as a GP, and I decided, okay, I want to take a shift. I want to start doing this in my practice. And I started looking into how I could roll it out in the UK. So I thought, I had specialized in dermatology. I'd had eczema from a child. I understood it very well. I was looking into all these different techniques. So I thought, I'm going to create a model to help people with eczema. And as soon as I looked into it in the UK, I couldn't find anyone to insure me at that point, because it was unknown. And so kind of to the point where I came to his workshop in the January, my eczema had actually flared up quite considerably. I was feeling very trapped, because I felt like I'd made some significant changes in my life, creating this wonderful relationship, feeling happy. But within my career and within speaking my truth, I'd felt very trapped. And hence my eczema kind of flared up. So it was at that point that I went to the advanced workshop, and he shares this visualization tool called Mind Movies, where you have to create a moving board of your intention, your future you want to create. So in this movie, I'd created a image. The second image I'd created was I inspire others by sharing my truth fearlessly, with a picture of a microphone, as if you're looking out on stage. So I'd kind of gone with that intention, because I was tired of having to keep quiet by that point and not speak out, and that's that realm of safety and all the fear that came up around that. So then shoot to January, where I go to this event, and it was a real immersive environment where you're meditating in and out of meditation all day. You're with a group of people who were right behind you, all trying to get to the same place. And again, he taught this breath technique of pulling the mind out of the body, pulling stored energy out of the body. And on the first, or it must have been the second day, I noticed when I was starting to do this breathing work that I was starting to get a lot of tightness around my throat, and my head was starting to pull back on me. And
now this is beyond your voluntary status, right?
Right. Yeah. So I was, as soon as I was getting into the work and not analyzing it too much, I just found very naturally that my neck would go back, and it felt like my neck was closing up. And I couldn't quite understand it at this point, and it scared me, because it was a physiological thing that I wasn't controlling. It was kind of taking over me. So I actually pulled out of some of those postures, because you always have this ability to do that if you want to. You always have that free will. So I pulled out of this posture, and kind of then was frustrated myself, disappointed that something might have happened, that I was really shifting some energy, and I kind of shut down the process because I was scared. So in the following day, I got the opportunity to wear brain mapping equipment. So this is the equipment that they strap to your head, which measures in real time the energy that's going on in your brain, and called the EEG. And I was sitting at the back of the room, because obviously you're all hooked up. So in the meditation process, I was sitting right at the back of the room with this plugged into this laptop, being hooked up with all this equipment. And I was sitting there. I was just thinking to myself, having had this frustration from not being able to speak my truth, from not having the proof when I wanted to go to these insurers and get insurance. I had this moment of thinking, what if I could show everyone, the believers and the non-believers, how powerful we are? What if I could do, I don't know, whatever it could be, something. And having known that I'd been scared the day before and I pulled out of a posture, I just dedicated that I was going to go beyond my body, whatever subconsciously had to come, whatever physiologically had to happen, I would just surrender to that process. So we do this meditation actually where we're watching these mind movies, including the image that I had created about speaking my truth fearlessly. And soon after the meditation finished, we are allowed to lie down, to allow the autonomic nervous system to take over, to allow the subconscious system within us to do what it needs to do. And once the meditation finished, I obviously couldn't lie down because I was hooked up to these computers right behind me, group of people. So I just sat there, and I think this was kind of what helped me, because I had zero expectation, because I didn't have that kind of pressure on it. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to see where this goes. And I just completely surrendered to whatever was to happen, and just whatever came up, I was going to surrender to. And very quickly, this energy that I'd noticed yesterday started to build in my neck, and my head started to turn back. And it was a scary sensation. It did literally feel, I mean, it sounds bizarre, but it literally felt like I was breathing through a pinhole. It felt so constricted, and I felt suffocated and terrified. But I knew that was part of my body kind of holding on. So I just kept pushing through it, and I took all my attention off it, and I just kept focusing on just connecting and surrendering and to love, to a higher state. And at some point, I just had this almighty movement of energy into my brain. It's just an explosion, and on the connection with the divine, of this feeling of coming home, this absolute sort of joy, this most overwhelming sensation and emotion of joy that I've ever had in my entire life. And it was so sort of joyous and wonderful. I kind of wanted to laugh. I wanted to laugh out loud, but I was kind of stuck like this. And it was an absolute knowing, a connection with the loving intelligence, and this like exchange of, it wasn't really in words, and I couldn't see anything. I could still hear. I was still kind of plugged into, if I wanted to be, of everything that was going on in the room. But I had this connection of, you've come home, you knew you'd do this, I've always been here. Just absolute love. And all the while I could hear these voices behind me. And I started to realize that some of the brain mapping team were starting to say the word seizure. And you'd think as a doctor, I'd be quite concerned about that. But to be honest, Guy, I was this was like the most blissful moment I'd ever had in my entire life. And it felt more real than this reality itself. It seems hard to explain that. But yeah. So whatever was going to happen, I wanted to stay there. And I just forgot about what was going on behind me, and I just totally gave into it. And I'm not sure how long that process went on for. You kind of lose track of time. When it eventually kind of left, I I just felt this overwhelming sort of lift. I just felt so much lighter, so much less matter, and just kind of days coming out of it. And I had one of the brain mapping team actually came up to me as soon as I opened my eyes. She was the first lady I saw, Claudia, and she said to me, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Because I wasn't really sure what happened. And then I later found out that it was a new brain mapping team, that they hadn't seen these amplitudes of energy in the brain. And Dr. Joad wanted to have a talk with them and explain, this technique that he teaches that many people can achieve. And so that they were concerned that I was having a seizure in my brain. But actually the difference with the seizure and this kind of level of energy is that it's incredibly coherent. It's not like a seizure, which is kind of very incoherent and all over the place. And I felt so joyous and so amazing. And they found out that the amplitude of energy in my brain was 190 standard deviations above normal.
190.
90, yes. So huge amount of energy, coherent energy in my brain.
If I'm not mistaken as well, I think Joe referred the energy is at like 60 hertz, I think, during the day, right, for the thinking brain. So times that by 190. That's what.
Well, in terms of, I think it's even higher than that, because it's like that bell-shaped curve of what's normal, and then
it compounds.
Right, yeah. So you kind of have the little edges, which is kind of like maybe 3%, and then you've got all this extra kind of potential that we all have access to, that we all can achieve. And he's measuring things like 500 standard deviations above normal now.
Yeah, it's out of control. First of all, thank you for sharing that. I love that story, only because I had similar experiences and can completely relate. I mean, it changed my life. I came away and I've ended up stepping down from 180 to focus on what I'm doing now. Because, so my question, when you get exposed to that, how did you integrate it? Like, what was your next steps? How did you think? It did question my whole, I felt very light, and I realized over the next few days, stuff just didn't seem to matter to me so much. I kind of had this real lightness and kind of giggliness and goofiness around me. And it kind of took me a while, because it does feel more real than this reality. It made me question a lot of stuff as well, but it also stopped me taking it so seriously. And that human part of me sometimes came in of, did that really happen? And then you realize it did. And the proof was really that I had all these lesions on my hand. My eczema had flared up. And within a couple of days, I wasn't, to be honest, I was on such a high, I didn't even look at my skin. I wasn't even consciously aware that it's not itching anymore, looking at it. I was just totally in love with life. But I realized as soon as I got home that all my lesions had cleared up. The really chronic, thick lesions had just gone. And I actually took a photo of them, because I'd taken one just before I left, because it was kind of not looking so good. And I sent it to the team just to show them what happened. So I kind of had that as a absolute, energy shift. Wow.
And also the bizarre thing was that my mind movie, this picture that I created, by the end of the event, because I was asked to come on stage to share some of my story, I actually manifested that image of speaking on stage, sharing my truth, and hopefully inspiring people that we're all capable of that, because I'm the most analytical person. I'm very analytical. So if I can do it as like, a once jaded, questioning doctor, then, I know everyone can do it. We all have access to this. So, yeah.
Amazing. And then with that, you could say that's a healing with the eczema moving. And now that starts going into the world of epigenetics and psychoneuroimmunology. Like it's massive, and it's so hard to wrap your head around as well. But when you start to see it really, all our core fundamental beliefs that we've grown up upon start to crumble.
Yes.
And then it's like, shit, I've got to relearn, or not relearn, but reevaluate, probably, I think is a better word.
Yeah.
So you have these experiences, you go back to UK. Then what?
Yeah. So it definitely took a while of integrating and trying to work out what I do with this. And I have to admit, Guy, that I did start to chase that experience. So as soon as I came back, I felt like I really needed to have that mind-blowing experience. Otherwise I wasn't connecting as well. And, just trying to recreate it, chase it, coming from a place of lack. So I did spend some time doing that. And I also had moments where I had this energy was building up in my throat. And when doing it on my own at home in the dark, I had this intense fear coming up, or feelings that something or someone was in the room. And this fear that I still, is an ongoing process in terms of just releasing it, was still coming up. So it was still ongoing new challenges that came to be, and challenges with my beliefs as well, and how I integrate it into my environment. Like, for example, my father unfortunately got very unwell, and so he was a dentist, and he developed a big cancer in his tongue.
Oh, wow.
And that was last year in the summer, and it was quite extensive. And he had lesions in his nose and in the neck, so it was vast spread. And that was a next stage of growth for me, because I had all there's my conventional model of treatment, and this new idea of what can be done, is possible. And again, I have to admit that I wasn't very eloquently maybe sharing my models with him, allowing him to go on his own journey. We all have our own truth to lead. So I was just coming from a place of trying to love him and keep him safe. I was maybe forcing some of my beliefs on him, which isn't congruent with who I am and what I should do. So that was another really interesting path for me, and surrendering to and respecting whatever he needed to do for him. And I'm blessed to say that he's come through his treatment, and he's doing remarkably well. So that surrender piece has been a real, another lesson that came as a result of, they just seem to keep coming. I don't know if you feel this as well, Guy. You kind of do one thing and then another layer of the onion seems to.
There's always you ask a question and then there's more questions when you get an answer. Like it just continues to unfold. And I've been in the last 18 months, I've been challenged in more ways than I ever thought was possible with myself. But it's been the greatest gift, because it forces me to look at myself and go to places where I didn't even know I was avoiding for many years of my life. And having the courage to do that, what lies on the other side is true freedom. And I think if we honor that, and that's why I was so excited to get you on, because you're such a great representative of continually stepping into that unknown, into that that uncertainty, and letting it unfold, and not letting the dogma of our past. Like I spoke to I mentioned earlier, I had Joshua Mance on the podcast, and he was a platoon leader, and he got shot by a sniper and flatlined for 15 minutes, and they CPR'd him for 15 minutes, and he said he felt his last breath. That was it, and he came back after 15 minutes and restored. But then for 10 years, he went on a whole traumatic roller coaster of suicide, PTSD, and all these things. And he said that the work to face their own truths and have the courage, it says, takes more courage than any firefight that he ever ran into. And then when he started to look at that, then he started to resolve, and he's just got this beautiful message now, and I think about that, and it's so true. It's so true. Question for you: how much do you think? Because you mentioned unworthiness right at the beginning of this podcast, and you know, and you went on to fulfill that need that you probably didn't even know that was underpinning everything.
Yeah.
So with everything you've experienced, how much do you think our emotions are actually affecting then the physical body?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of the piece, if not sometimes the whole piece. The cascade that happens is the state of our emotional well-being and the chemistry that's created and how that can be stored in our physical bodies. I do feel like it's the thread that ties everything together. Yeah, I really do understand that now. And I'm glad that sort of science is catching up with that, understanding that we intuitively kind of know on a gut level, really, and on a heart level, but that science is starting to explain what we've kind of known for years, and is giving us all permission to acknowledge that part of us too, and not having any shame around it and having compassion around it. I think it's a wonderful, exciting time, I think, in our history, where everything feels like it's unfolding. The truth is bubbling to the surface. Definitely.
Yeah. So then what happened? So you've gone back, you've gone through all this, like with your dad, because I know you made a decision to step down from being from practicing GP. Yeah. Is that correct? Yeah. Like, how did that decision feel to you at the time? Because that's a huge decision.
Yeah, it was definitely that. I realized from that sense of needing control, that fear factor, letting go of my dad and, accepting whatever he needed to do. And also that control of finances, of safety, of certainty that comes with that profession, and there's maybe the respect that comes with it. That whole identity piece, that ego piece, letting go of that. When I eventually, I clung on to it for a long time. When I eventually let go of it, it was like a release of just taking off a heavy jacket that I've been wearing for the last 18 years, trying to make it fit, and it's scratchy and it's itchy, and but eventually taking it off and kind of surrendering to my truth, just planting lots of seeds and seeing where the river winds and where I'm guided to go, and having the faith in that has been really freeing. And that's where the gifts seem to have come, when I've stopped trying to force the outcome, and where the challenges that have come as well, that I need to grow, an area that I need to grow in. So for example, I'll share like a failure I had with you when I started on this journey of leaving GP. I decided, well, I'm going to do a detox program to help women, because it's kind of a bit, it's not conventional, but it's not too sort of out there. And I was kind of playing it safe and trying to just basically not fully committing. And, unsurprisingly, that just bombed, because I wasn't being aligned and I wasn't really dealing with the underlying fear beneath it. So I feel fortunate that I'm at a point now where I know my worthiness isn't invested in how successful I am, or what people think of me in that way. I know that I just want to serve and share truth with others, and just however that looks. And I'm not 100% clear on that yet. I'm still finding my way with it. But through having picked up various tools through the years, which I found have completely changed my path, and I would have loved some of this information. If someone had given this to me a package in 5 years ago, I would have loved it. So all this stuff that's coming out that we're all learning now is amazing. And that's kind of what I want to share and provide a platform for.
Yeah, wonderful. And like you said, I love the analogy of the jacket as well. And for anyone listening to this, if you feel like you've got a jacket that you need to take it off in life, like, just do it. It's amazing what can be on the other side of that.
Absolutely, yeah. That fear piece does, at the peak of it, when it feels like you can't handle it anymore, when you do let go, it is just a complete transition. Absolutely powerful.
And last thing before we get into the other questions as well, it just triggers. One thing I was going to ask you today was about the mind-body connection, but But what do you think about then with the body kind of almost ruling the show, even though analytically?
Yeah.
What was happening? What was happening to you physically when you knew you were trying, you just could take that jacket off yet? Then, what was going on emotionally at that time?
I definitely appreciate now that it was those subconscious programs of my biological makeup as I had trained it to be through the years. This biological printout which I had created in my physical body. That I wasn't consciously aware of. Our subconscious just wants to keep us safe, and it's doing the best it can with the resources it has. And if we keep feeding it, or I kept feeding it with stress and fear of failure or need for certainty, then as soon as I pushed it out into an uncertain state, it would just cling on and pull me back to this place that I had trained it to be. So, emotions really are stored of that. They are the language of the body. So as soon as something came up which my body interpreted as unsafe, it would tell me to run a mile. It would tell my analytical mind, and this is not safe. You get real, all that kind of stuff. So I'm in an evolving point of knowing when that emotion is coming from my fear, from a place that doesn't serve me, or if it's coming from my highest interest, my higher self, and that I need to. It's a challenge to overcome.
Yeah. That's what doing the work. That's why meditation's so beautiful, because you start to you get in tune. You start to distinguish the difference, and then I always tell people, I think of it like this puppy dog that's just disobedient and starts misbehaving. But you're able to catch it and observe it, and then interrupt it, as opposed to fully buy into it and accept it. That's the way it is.
100%. And those addictions, I find it quite empowering to know that it's nothing to do with me. It's just an addiction to that emotion. That kind of helps me separate it from, just really, this is a program. This is not me. This is just an addiction to a chemical which I need to wean myself off of. That can certainly help. Amazing.
Well, mate, I'm going to change gears. I got a couple of questions to ask everyone on the show.
Yeah, please.
And we kind of cover it, but I'd still be interested to see how you answer this. What's one of your low points in life you've had, but has later in life become a blessing?
Probably when I was at the point where I'd done everything right. So I'd become a GP, I'd bought into a partnership, I'd bought a house, I'd done everything that I felt I should do to be happy, and was feeling completely alone. It was actually my birthday. I think it was my 33rd birthday or something. I was working hard as a GP all day, on call, and went into a meeting with the partners and was late. And because we were all so lacking in resources, because I was the newbie, I guess, I was called upon to do extra hours as part of that was the outcome of the meeting that I was late to. So I was kind of, in effect, dumped on a little bit, and I just felt completely unsupported, completely alone, and like I was drowning. And I got to the end of that day and went back home to my house on my own on my birthday, and just felt completely lost. I did not know what to do. I remember sitting on the bottom of my stairs just crying and not knowing what to do. But it was at that point that I realized that something had to change. I had to start making decisions which weren't for other people, weren't going to weren't to make other people happy, and that I was going to have to get out of this partnership. I was going to have to give up that commitment I'd given to them and start drawing some effort and attention to me to start to fill up from the inside out. So if I hadn't have had that really painful low moment, then it probably wouldn't have gone on this journey. So I'm kind of, it was a blessing for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. It makes me think, I had an entrepreneur on here called Kerwin Ray on a podcast a few weeks ago. And he said, he would say it's the feather, brick or Mack truck scenario. So you'd have messages from the universe, there's a little feather tickling your cheek, say, hey, you listening? and you're like, nah, you just brush it off and ignore it. And then a few months later, it's a brick in your head to wake you up. And then eventually it's a Mack truck will plow you over if you keep, ignoring those signals.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
That's such a good analogy.
Next question, mate. What does your morning routine look like these days?
So these days, I get up and meditate. So I get up, drink, and meditate for an hour or more.
That might scare some people.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't start like that. Trust me. It took a while to get there. But it is if I don't take that time to align each morning, then it affects the rest of my day. So it's worth the payoff. Even if I say to myself, oh, I'm too tired, or I didn't sleep that well, or I need more energy for later, all those kind of things that come up, I know that hour that I spend aligning and connecting will pay dividends, and that I won't feel tired later, that I'll overcome it. So I kind of start to recognize that chatter now. But recently I'm very lucky that I live in Vancouver, and I now cycle to the beach once I've done that, get in the water and swim in the ocean. And I've actually started doing some Wim Hof breathing before we go in as well. So yeah, me and my other half, we sit down, we do some Wim Hof, and then we go into the water, do a lap, and come out and cycle home. So it's in some early mornings, but it's the best way to start the day.
Amazing. That sounds very different to in London going to the hospital to work.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Totally different world. And I can feel that reflect in me and how I can be with other people throughout the day. So I'm really blessed.
Amazing. If you could have dinner with anyone tonight, anywhere in the world, in any time frame, past, present, whatever, who would it be and why?
Oh, okay. So there's lots of people I'd like to have a conversation with. I'm fascinated with stories of mystical experiences, which have probably because of my doctor background, mystical experiences which involve healing. So I would love to, like Anita Morjani, I'd love to have a conversation with her. All those other unsung heroes as well, other people who've had them, who never have had a voice to do it. In fact, I want to start a podcast to give these people a voice. So just to share their insights and their journey. So that's another step for me. Because we live in such an amazing world these days that you can get all this stuff out there to people.
It's amazing. This will reach thousands of people.
Yeah, just when there's something you can hang on to, if it's a particular condition that you've had that you've been told, has no hope, or if you hear someone's story like that, that can change your future fundamentally in that moment. So yeah, that's one of my next steps that I'm going to be taking.
Love it. You got to do that, man. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay, thank you. I'm doing it.
What's one thing about yourself most people wouldn't know?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Well, I like a lot of improvised theatre, so I've started doing improv theatre. Even though it's terrifying, it's a good little trainer actually, because it's this environment where you don't know what's happening. It's complete uncertainty, and you just have to roll with it. And it's a beautiful community of any idea is accepted and encouraged, and you build upon it. So I love the ethos of that. It's this whole yes and culture. So probably not a lot of people would know that I do improv theatre.
That's awesome. That's brilliant. I didn't know that. There you go.
Yeah.
And is there anything else you would like to add for our listeners to ponder on before we wrap up?
Yeah. But just thank you for listening. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I think we all have the answers that lie within us too. And it's just taking that time for yourself to get rid of all those distractions, to really connect and listen to who you are at your core, and having that compassion for yourself, to have that time and forgiveness of whatever's brought you to this point to allow you to step forward. So yeah, just having that faith in yourself, and that we're all truly powerful and we can achieve whatever we want when we set our minds to it.
Totally. Amen to that. And where can I send everyone if they want to find out more about you, Carla? Where's the best place to send them?
So probably the best place is drcarlastanton.com.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some free products there, and workshops and things that I'm creating. So yeah, just check it out. And we have a Facebook group as well, Mind Body Medicine. So yeah, connect with me there and connect with our community. Great to have you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you for being so open and vulnerable to share your story with everyone, Carl. I get inspired every time I speak to you and hear that. And it just spurs me on myself, with everything I do and the work we do and the message we're trying to get out there for people. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Guy. Thank you for having me. And I mean, the same to you, buddy. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. It really inspires me to carry on doing this stuff. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.